They told me the Appalachians would heal me. They said the air would make my lungs honest again, that the silence would stitch my nights back together. The first night I slept in the cabin, lying awake while the moon poured through the single window, I understood how generous silence can be and how dangerous. My name is Evan. I moved up here because the city had started to feel like a bad dream I couldn't wake from. Fluorescent hum, people who never learned to lower their voices, a rhythm that shoved you forward and never let you breathe. The cabin was cheap, stubborn, and honest in a way my apartment never was. 2 rooms, a wood stove with a stubborn temper, a sagging bed, and a window that opened onto a bowl of mountains. It was exactly what I asked for, isolation with a view. The house smells like pine sap and old paper. When I first unpacked, I left a book open on the table and a photograph face down for reasons I couldn't name. Night fell fast and dense, the kind of black that has weight. Outside, the ridgelines cut the sky into teeth. Inside, the cottage kept its own small, careful warmth. My first nights were the easiest, the ones where loneliness still felt like a promise. I would wake to wind sighing through the pines and the occasional owlet calling to the dark. There was a rhythm to those sounds, a predictability that comforted me. Then, small things started to unthread. The first was a sound so thin, I almost convinced myself it was my imagination. A soft, deliberate tapping at the glass of the window in the room where I slept. It came once at 2 a.m., 3 gentle knocks, evenly spaced, like knuckles testing a name. I sat up, heart doing a clumsy echo in my throat, and held my breath so long I tasted copper. The window was closed. The pane hummed faintly with the house's settling. Outside, the moon rolled white and indifferent over the peaks. I told myself it was probably a falling branch, or a squirrel, or the way the wind can make a twig drum on a sill. I tried to sleep after that, but the taps had left a ghostly rhythm in my bones. The upstairs floorboards remembered my weight and complained. The house breathed. When morning came, I found nothing on the porch, no broken twig, no stray paw prints in the thin snow that still clung to the ground. I convinced myself I was tired, that a city-worn brain will prod events into patterns when it wants a story. The second thing that changed my nights was the windows themselves. During the day, I would leave them open for the air, and each afternoon I found them closed. Not merely latched, shut with a neatness that suggested someone had taken care to draw the curtains and settle the glass. Once I found an old smear on the inside of the glass, like a child's hand smudged against a pane, only cleaner and colder to the touch. My skin prickled when I ran my fingers through it, as if rubbing something that had not only been wet, but attentively watching. There were other small betrayals. A page missing from a book I hadn't opened in weeks, the faint scent of something rot adjacent under the bed, the radio flickering static for a single second, and shaping itself into a tone that made my teeth ache. Each thing was minor, explainable, but together they stacked like sediment, until I felt less like a tenant and more like an intruder. On the third night, the tapping came again, only closer this time, right at the glass like a fingernail tracing letters I could not read. I turned on the lamp, the light a poor sun that did not touch the far edges of the room. The moonlight pooled against the mountains, and a silhouette stood beyond the frame of the window, not distinct enough to be a person, not far enough to be a trick. Its eyes, if it had any, were not visible, but when I leaned toward the pane, breath fogging the cold, a slow grin seemed to settle into the dark outside, and the bed beside me felt so thin and exposed that I could hear each breath as a separate animal. I went to sleep with the lamp on that night, and woke unable to tell whether it was the wind or a slow, almost conversational rustle that slid across the sill. The house had begun to speak in the voices of small, ordinary things. I began to count how many ways something could stand at your window and not be where you expect it to be. I don't know when my curiosity became something else. I only know that curiosity pulled me to the glass again and again, and each time the mountains seemed to hold their breath. I kept telling myself I was imagining things, that solitude was turning shadows into company, but the mind has a way of making lies feel like mercy. After the fourth night, mercy was gone. The tapping didn't stop. It grew more confident, like a guest knocking with the assurance of being invited inside. Not frantic, not random, always 3 knocks, evenly spaced, with a pause between them as though waiting for me to answer. I stopped sleeping in the bed. I dragged the mattress across the room, farther from the window. It didn't help. The sound followed me, sometimes at the window above the sink, sometimes against the glass in the living room. One night, it came from 2 different windows at once. I told myself it was animals, branches, tricks of wind, and wood. But then I saw it clearly. It was just after midnight. The moon hung over the peaks like a dull eye, and the tapping started again, this time sharp and deliberate. My heart raced, but I forced myself to look. The window pane glowed faintly from the moonlight, and framed in it was a face. It was wrong. Not a man's face, not an animal's either. Bald, smooth, skin too pale, almost bluish in the moonlight. The mouth stretched unnaturally wide, like someone had carved too much smile into too little skin. And the eyes, they were too round, too bright, too fixed on me. They didn't blink. They didn't move. They only stared through the glass with a hunger so patient it felt endless. I couldn't move. My body locked in place. The figure leaned closer, and though the window was shut, I swear I heard breath fogging the glass from the outside. A sound like damp laughter crawled through the silence. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the mattress. By the time I found the courage to look again, the face was gone. The window was empty, only mountains crouching behind the glass. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next day I tried to reason with myself. Maybe it was a dream. Maybe my brain, worn down by loneliness, was turning shadows into monsters. But then I saw something that broke every excuse. On the inside of the window pane, drawn faintly in condensation, were words, "You will live Ailey in the mountains." The spelling was jagged, like a child learning to write, but the message was unmistakable. Someone, or something, had been inside. I scrubbed the glass clean, but the letters left an afterimage in my mind that wouldn't wash away. The house no longer felt like mine. Its silence was no longer peaceful. It was waiting, listening. I caught myself holding my breath, straining for sounds that shouldn't exist. The floor creaked in empty rooms. Doors I swore I'd closed were ajar. Once, I smelled damp earth in the hallway, like something had tracked in soil from the woods. The figure at the window returned every night, always watching, always smiling. Sometimes it would tap the glass, sometimes it would simply stand there, motionless, letting me know it was patient. I started keeping the lights on, but even then I would catch it outlined against the glow, its round eyes gleaming as if lit from within. I tried leaving the cabin once. I packed my things in a frantic rush, throwing them into the car. But the road that wound down the mountain was swallowed in fog so dense I couldn't see past the hood. The air was heavy, suffocating. My chest tightened with every turn until I felt like I was being squeezed back toward the cabin. When I finally gave up and returned, the fog vanished as if it had never been there. That night, the tapping didn't come. Instead, the window was already open. And in the silence, I could hear something moving inside. The window was open. I stood in the dark, frozen, listening. At first, nothing but my own heartbeat, jagged, frantic, loud enough I swore it would give me away. Then I heard it. The sound of something dragging lightly against the floorboards, a soft shuffle, like bare feet too slow, too deliberate. The air felt heavier than it ever had, thick and cold, as though the cabin itself was holding its breath. I didn't dare move. I wanted to believe it was an animal, a raccoon maybe, or a trick of my restless mind. But then came the sound that shattered any hope. A low chuckle, wet and gurgling, as if it was trying to imitate laughter without fully understanding how. I forced my eyes toward the window. The pale face was gone. The frame yawned open, and moonlight stretched across the floor in a cold rectangle. Something darker than shadow detached itself from the corner. It stepped forward. The figure was taller than I expected, its limbs too long, its posture hunched as though it barely knew how to wear the shape of a man. That grin, God, that grin, it hadn't changed. Wide, frozen, gleaming with teeth that looked too many for the mouth that held them. And the eyes, they weren't eyes anymore. They glowed, not with light, but with attention. They saw me. Not the way a stranger glances, but the way a predator marks its prey. I backed toward the door, fumbling for the latch, but my hands were clumsy, numb. The figure raised one finger to its lips, a shushing gesture. The sound it made was like wind through broken glass. "Live alone," it rasped, the voice guttural, dissonant, wrong in every possible way. "In the mountains." The words weren't spoken to me, they were carved into me. Every syllable crawled across my skin, sank into my bones. The next moments are a blur of fear. I remember running, though I couldn't tell you where. I remember the door refusing to open the first time I pulled at it, as though the wood itself was clenching against me. I remember the feeling of breath on the back of my neck, cold and damp, chasing me down the hall. I woke up outside. I don't know how. The ground was wet with dew, the sky still dark, and the cabin stood behind me, silent, every window shut tight as if nothing had ever disturbed them. I should have left then, driven until the mountains were only a memory in my rearview. But I didn't. Something kept me here, a pull I can't explain, like roots curling tighter around my ankles. Nights don't pass anymore. They stretch, they twist. The tapping has returned, louder, more insistent. Sometimes at the window, sometimes at the walls, sometimes from inside the room before I even realize it. I've stopped looking, because when I do, it's always there, smiling, waiting. I don't know how long I've been here. Days blur, nights bleed. But one truth has carved itself into my mind as surely as those words on the glass. No one comes to the mountains to live alone. Something is already here, and it wants me to stay.
Subscribe to Horror Story Bar.